Hollow Knight Silksong might just be the most anticipated video game release of the entire year, which is ironic considering that it got announced and then released within like 2 weeks. And after its announcement, it made so many people download and start playing through the original Hollow Knight for the first time in anticipation for this game. I mean, for crying out loud, the Silksong is real! The clown wings can come off! It's here and it's so fun! I mean, this game was so hyped that other indie games had to delay their release dates by a month or two so they wouldn't have to compete with it. It's absolutely insane that other people recognized that their game would be forgotten about and buried before it even released if they tried competing. As someone who only played through the original game back in 2023, 6 years after the initial release, I can tell you that when I heard the news that Silksong was releasing, I played through the entirety of OG Hollow Knight again and got 105% completion. I didn't do the Godseeker stuff because I didn't know how to get to it. I beat Nightmare King Grim, I beat the Radiance, and like a good little boy with my propeller hat and lollipop in hand, I thought that I was going to be prepared for Hollow Knight Silksong's release, and I couldn't have been more wrong. And there are so many ways I could take the review of this game, but for the sake of my sanity as I edit, because I am not Maxor, I'm going to try and keep it short, sweet, and to the point. So let's discuss the craziness of this game and the honest truth about Hollow Knight Silksong. Now, I know what you're here for. You're here for me to tell you that the game is too hard and that Team Cherry needs to take away double damage from the enemies and all of this other bull. Yes, I'm censoring my swears now because I don't want my videos to get hidden by YouTube's arbitrary decisions. And yes, this game is hard, and I know it's a big part of people's attention on the game at this point, so let's talk about The game is genuinely difficult. I cannot deny that, but it's also something that I personally have no problem with. I do agree that there are some weird decisions for the game that add to the difficulty, but overall I wanted this game to be more difficult than OG Hollow Knight. Like if it was the same bosses, same map, and same progression, all with a new coat of paint over it, then the game wouldn't feel as unique as it does. It would be like taking a stand-up comic like Shane Gillis or Bill Burr, looking at their set for tonight and telling them, no, we're not doing that. Just do what you did on a bunch of those random TikTok clips I got of you. Like I said, there are some questionable decisions, like the fact that you start at 5 masks and for the entirety of Act 1 you can only get 1 extra mask, but with bosses doing 2 masks of damage, you spend all of that time getting an extra mask just to still die in 3 hits. But I think a lot of people's frustration doesn't just come from the damage output, it also comes from the control scheme because it is so different from OG Hollow Knight. In the first game, the controls were incredibly tight, and combat felt especially nice because of that tight control scheme where you were able to eke out every little bit of damage against an incredibly hard boss fight. You won those fights not only because you started to know their moveset, but because you had more meth inside of your body to decimate these bosses so you could get their money and go buy more meth. I mean, the Knight was basically a natural disaster plowing through Hollow Nest. But Hornet isn't the Knight. Her playstyle in Silksong makes much more sense when you start thinking of it like a dance and less like you're in a back alley street fight trying to steal someone else's meth. I don't know why I'm doing so many drug-related jokes, but I do think the Knight was on something because no one else would see someone minding their own business and decide to swing on sight. Hornet is much more fluid in how she is designed, and the fights are meant to match that design idea, which is a hard pivot from what Hollow Knight fans are used to. And the fights begin to get easier when you take your time, slow down your play, and stop acting like if you don't hit the attack button, you'll explode. Not to mention, you have these things called crests, which are used to change how Hornet fights, from her base kit to large AoE swings to being a feral animal to literally just Hollow Knight, which is ironic considering what I was just talking about. There's a variety of different playstyles that need to be accounted for in at least some respect while designing boss fights. And also, since we're being honest, I don't think this difficulty is without reason. Not only is this the sequel that was initially designed as DLC, but it's also similar to the first game. Maybe the majority of people have forgotten due to the amount of time that's passed, but I remember OG Hollow Knight being incredibly hard. I remember having to run back from bosses like the Mantis Lord so many times, and the first time I tried to fight the Hollow Knight, I swear I spent 2 days on it. This difficulty can come down to the same thing that made OG Hollow Knight so hard to begin with, and that's the unfamiliarity. Even with bosses that are relatively simple, they're so unfamiliar and you're in a new control scheme that you haven't played with before that they can take multiple tries to beat and sometimes feel feel impossible. So, while I do believe that Silksong is objectively harder than OG Hollow Knight, it's not something I fault the game for or something I think is bad, but rather a combination of the different combat style and the unfamiliarity people have with the systems and boss fights in general. Speaking of, I really want to talk about the best way that I can describe the boss fights in Silksong is you go from fighting the video game equivalent of the Very Hungry Caterpillar to fighting f***ing Melania Blade of Mikola. Like, at the start of the fight, the boss is moving slowly, their attacks are telegraphed, and you get a general idea of what they're doing. Then you get them low enough and they start screaming at you just to say, "You think that's all I got? Nah, bro, that was just phase 1. No more playing, I'm gonna show you what it's like to meet the devil." Don't you mean God? Nah, I'm sending you straight to the boiler room of hell. And then everything either starts exploding or they completely change how they've been acting and it goes so hard. Like, I don't think I can accurately describe how good it feels to fight some of these bosses, even when I'm losing. And the feeling you get when you finally beat the boss that you've perfected the run back to but have been dying within like 2 seconds to each time is such a dopamine high. Some bosses, admittedly, are much easier than others, and some, while having fairly simple movesets, give enough players enough of a challenge that Team Cherry had to decide to nerf 2 of them. I beat them before the nerf though. And one thing I want to say is that the bosses in Silksong legitimately feel like you need to use every tool at your disposal to beat. In OG Hollow Knight, there were times I'd walk out of the boss fight having done nothing but use my nail, and it wasn't because I was trying to challenge myself, it was because it never felt necessary to use any of my spells. While in Silksong, it feels like I need to use every option I have in order to kill a lot of these bosses. Whether it's the various movement options in the game, the various tool options, which is this game's version of charms, or even swapping what crest you're using, we'll talk about that later, it feels like there's not really optional parts to this game's combat. Each boss is here to be a knowledge and skill check for the player at the level they're supposed to be at before getting to the next one, and if you cannot pass those checks, then you'll feel like you're going up against a brick wall that you cannot recover from. And while technically not a boss fight, the gauntlets that this game can throw at you are absolutely insane sometimes, to the point where they're literally just get good checks. I mean, look at the one that's been playing in the background so far. I had to remain completely locked in for so long to do this one and then deal with 2 mini bosses at once? Like, this feels like something that you'd see in the Arena of Fools, and no, it's just a normal gauntlet. Exploration is the name of the game if you want to have and do anything of worth in a game that's mysteriously named Hollow Knight Silksong. Now, exploration in Silksong is honestly one of my few points of contention with the game. In OG Hollow Knight, the game was designed around tight corridors with enemies that you have to fight through in order to progress, or make tight turns around them in order to progress by them. In Silksong though, the caverns are giant and sprawling with so much space to move around that it's so easy to be able to get around enemies, and there's similar levels of platforming letting you go around this giant room up and down and all around. This leads to an interesting dichotomy for most OG Hollow Knight fans, where there were many more enemies that were exclusive to the ground because for the most part there wasn't anywhere else to put them and the knight didn't have ways to entirely avoid them without having them chase behind him. However, in Silksong the level design leads to the need for a lot more enemies which are able to fly and keep up with where Hornet goes, and while I think flying enemies are definitely a necessity, these guys are just so... Okay, it's like when you're trying to hit a fruit fly, where every time you try to hit them, the air resistance is enough that they just get to fly away unscathed, and now you're getting angry because you're asking yourself, how can you not hit something this tiny? How can it be this much faster than you? So eventually you just need to take a can of hairspray and a lighter and just burn the whole house down. That's what it feels like to fight a lot of the flying enemies in Silksong, and they're littered almost everywhere throughout the game because without them, the game would either need to completely change how it's designed, or there would need to be enemies on literally every platform so you can't just run past them. And just like in any good Metroidvania, there's not only a lot of doubling back, but for some upgrades, it feels like you need to go out of your way in order to get them. For reference, I got to the final boss of Silksong and beat it without even knowing that the double jump existed in this game, much less where to get it. Which sucks because that means there was an entire area of the map that I could see I needed double jump to get to, but straight up couldn't because I didn't have the upgrade. And this was a problem for a long time in the game for me, where I could see the exact upgrade I needed to get to certain places, and I would see that I needed it multiple times to the point where I would walk past like 20 areas that I needed wall jumping for, only to get it 2 hours after that. Just the time it took to get to the necessary upgrades also made it so much harder to remember each and every little spot I needed to go to actually make use of said upgrade. Which is how I missed an entire other spot in Silksong because I didn't remember that there were rings here to get me up there. I swear, I felt like I was taking my time playing this game and checking everything I could, but going back into it after beating the final boss and seeing how much I missed is just so strange to me. Some people in the comments are probably going to be like, it's just a skill issue, you noob, and I am going to promptly laugh at those people because they are dumb. One thing that's also new about the game are wishes, which I'm going to spend the rest of the video calling them quests because that's how my mind works. Quests are pretty standard, where you have some that need you to fight a boss, some that need you to gather specific materials, some that need you to find a lost courier, and hey, you remember that delicate flower quest from OG Hollow Knight? Well, how about that exact same quest, but like 7 different times? And hey, this one is also timed, so you better know the best way to speedrun back to this one specific guy. Oh my god, I would go all the way from here, all the way up there, without taking more than 3 hearts of damage. Yeah, that's gonna suck. And the thing that makes sense is that some of these quests are tied to progression, like Hornet's ability to float through the air. However, those are usually tied to fetch quests, and there's a lot of them. There's nothing necessarily bad about fetch quests, with the biggest problem really being that there's just so many of them, making you have to double back or stay longer in areas that you already cleared. Or, in the case of Hornet's ability to float through the air, the enemy that you need to farm isn't plentiful enough, and the quest doesn't explain that you need them to shoot their spikes out to actually get the component you need, because killing them doesn't have a 100% chance of dropping it. That is one of my biggest pet peeves with any fetch quest in any game though. Like, hey, I need you to go get me 10 zebra hooves, and then I loot a zebra just to find out that it somehow doesn't have any hooves. Like, what do you mean? They're right there! And not only are some of the fetch quests tied to gameplay progression, whether that is a completely new ability that gets you to a new area, more items in a shop leading to more tools and extra resources, or story progression that can have you fighting more of the bosses that Silksong has in it and progressing individual stories like Sherma's. This has just been one of my major criticisms of the game, just the fact that the exploration and progression of the game can feel so incredibly tedious at times, especially when some of it is tied to fetch quests. Now, I'll be completely honest here. I am not the biggest lore guy. I am not the person who searches through every single item description, every single book, and every single NPC interaction to try to piece together the entirety of the story before and during what is happening in the game, and understand each individual ending. There are things that I will miss, even if I am trying to 100% a game, so take this section as much more of a review of what someone who is invested in the game, but is not going to be understanding the complete story is saying. All of that being said though, I personally like the story that Silksong presents us with. At the core of it all, you have the Citadel, which acts as this holy place that bugs from all over the place attempt to make a pilgrimage to in order to receive its holy gifts. However, the Citadel isn't this benign source of holy power. At its core, the Citadel acts as 2 things within Farloom. The first is an authoritative power that controls the entirety of Farloom beneath it, using this power to subjugate its people into near slave labor and being uncaring when it comes to the struggles of its people. In addition, it is also a symbol of religious corruption, as it begs for bugs to crawl their way towards it only to then either be killed by that very same Citadel or to have their bodies reanimated in service to the Citadel by the Silk of Grandmother Silk. It is a very different theme from what OG Hollow Knight gave us. While the knight was battling through the remnants of a kingdom that had fallen apart, Hornet is actively fighting through a kingdom that is alive, even if it needs to cling to that life dearly. And the themes of religious and authoritative oppression ring out throughout the entirety of Silksong. Just when you think the Citadel can't get even worse, or there's a problem that they've been ignoring too long, boom, jail anyone that does sense. Boom, string up people and take their lives for no reason. Boom. Literally kill your own citizens when they are on your doorsteps. While I'm still personally fuzzy on the details of why they needed Hornet Silk in particular, I know they've tried quarter and eighth weavers before, and Hornet is half weaver, so she should be more of what they need. I'm still unsure why they need her though. At best, it really serves as a plot device for why Hornet is captured and taken to Farloom, and why she can't just run away from it either, because the Citadel will always have bugs ready to try to capture her again. Overall, even coming from someone that doesn't understand each and every single detail of the story, nor what each individual character's stories are, except for Sherma because he's literally my son, and if anything bad ever happened to him, Team Cherry, I know you are somewhere in Australia and I will hunt you down to the end of your days! I thoroughly enjoyed everything that I could understand, and this video would take way too long if you asked me to try to recite the entirety of Silksong's lore. Actually, let me know if you want me to poorly explain the lore, and maybe we can make a video out of that. Overall, Hollow Knight Silksong was an incredibly fun experience, and even though I may not have been in the trenches and praying for its release for as long as some other fans of the series have, I can say that it was well worth the wait. Even as I've been writing this script, I've seen more bosses that I haven't experienced yet scroll past my feed on TikTok and YouTube Shorts, and it just makes me want to keep playing this game and explore every little secret that I can. And to me, that's possibly the best part about any game. If I can sit there playing it for multiple hours on end, only to then have to leave it and spend those hours that I can't play imagining what I'll do the second that I can play it again, that is one of the biggest stamps of approval I think I can give out. So, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it in the future, be sure to hit that subscribe button to be updated whenever any of my new videos comes out. If you disagreed with what I said, then let me know in the comments section down below, and if you agreed with it, then tell me who your favorite character is from Silksong and why. I do tend to respond to all the comments that I can, so you'll be seeing a lot of me down there too. Also, Naked Hornet jump scare. Bye bye!